Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 106. Today's episode is called Hedonic Treadmill. Today is all about happiness. That's what I'm talking about today, happiness. So the Hedonic Treadmill is I came across hedonic adaptation a few years ago in a book. Just researched it this evening, and the guys who came up with it are Brickman and Campbell. They coined the term for hedonic adaptation, hedonic treadmill. But this is going back a long time. This is something that appears in philosophy as well, because it's at the root of it is like the question of where does happiness come from and how do you live a good life. These are things that have been talked about by Aristotle and different philosophers over the years. Seneca, any philosopher, this has probably crossed their mind. So I'm just going to share some things that have helped me practically when it comes to hedonic adaptation, just seeing it play out in my life, because I'd actually noticed this play out in my life, this pattern play out in my life before I started reading psychology. I referred to it as like the I'll be happy when loop. And I thought that was like an original thing. I thought it was like an original thought I was having, and started reading until I started reading more and I started realizing that this is something that people cop onto after a while. It's just this incessant urge to seek things that will make you happy, but it plays out at like an unconscious level. So you're not fully aware of why you do the things you do. So a practical example of this would be on a small scale, on a micro scale, it'll be something, even consumerism plays into this a lot. So even with the latest iPhone, if you got an iPhone 6 today, and then an iPhone, 12 or 13 or wherever the hell it's on now. If you got an iPhone 12 today, and the iPhone 13 comes out, and you are satisfied with the 12, but now you want the 13, you don't know why exactly you want it, but you want it. Like on a feeling level, it'll feel like you'll be happier if you get this object. But this is a flawed perception in our thinking, in the way we look at things. It's flawed as well. Like for me, a lot of it came down to just not questioning basic underlying assumptions and questions I was making. Like with this, I find it helpful as like a thought experiment, as something I keep in my mind. I didn't find it helpful to actually take this too seriously, as in like stopping yourself from ever wanting things because you didn't want to fall into this trap. But I found that like just having this in my awareness helps me more so than before when I didn't have it in my awareness. Because when I didn't have it in my awareness, it was like that treadmill effect. It was like running on a treadmill. I didn't know I was on a fucking treadmill. But at least with this, it gives you the understanding that you're on a treadmill in those moments where you're seeking a sense of fulfillment and happiness, and you get to the mountain, you get on top of the mountain, and you realize it's been a fleeting sense of happiness, so I need to set, you'll either think that I'll need to set another goal, another mountain, reach another mountain, or you just kind of give up. You're like, Jesus, why do I even bother? There's so much effort trying to get up this mountain, and that feeling didn't last for that long. It was a bit of an illusion. So there's two kind of tracks you can go down there. But an alternative track is to realize you're on a treadmill. You can step off that treadmill. The beauty of stepping off the treadmill is that things slow down more in your own mind. As you gain a bit more experience, this is what I've gradually been finding out. When I was on that treadmill, what it looked like was like me going to university, getting the degree, me doing this and that, trying to fit in with a certain friends group, trying to fit in, different things. Like that was the kind of mindset. It was like I didn't know why I was doing that. I always assumed that that's the way I was supposed to be, and it was like a treadmill effect. Like I felt empty inside an awful lot, but I didn't realize you could not feel empty inside. So I was just on a treadmill of like the things that society tells you to do. But it's mainly navigating that. Like I'm not saying to go black and white in this stuff, because I see people have a tendency to go, oh, I'm anti the establishment, or I'm anti this, that, and the other. It's finding the balance here, realizing that there is a treadmill here that we are all on. If you don't know you're on a treadmill, then it's just you're not aware you're on a treadmill, because you are on some sort of treadmill. If you haven't already stepped off a treadmill, then chances are you're on a treadmill. So what stepping off the treadmill allows you to do, it allows you to actually gain some space and time to actually think through things. Because when you step off the treadmill, you realize it's no longer a race. Because up until that point, life feels like a race. It feels like you're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to fit in with the in-group, trying to determine who the in-group are, trying to determine what job to have, what's the best paying things, and like all this stuff. There's importance to this stuff, but you can get lost in all that stuff and not know why you're doing anything. So stepping off the treadmill, what this has allowed me to do is to realize, to give me, first and foremost, give me perspective. Then it also allows me the time and space to actually think through things. Another great thought experiment is, just imagine that everybody in the world is gone, but all the materials are still there. Like you got the cars, you've got anything you wanted, anything you think your heart's desire wants is there. And just think about, like, how would that play out? Like, how would that actually play out in the long term? It could be great for the first few days, first few weeks, first few months, but think about it over a period of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Like, how would that play out when there's no other people around? And that's when you get to what you really think about things. Like, when there is nobody actually around, there's nobody there to project your thoughts process onto or project your limitations onto. There's nobody to blame. So you get to see your thought process. So this is just a thought experiment, but this can have great implications as well, because it gives you an insight into the thought process around why you desire certain things in your life. I think there's an element of experimentation to all of this. Like, I don't think it helps to take this too seriously, but I also don't think it helps to not ever entertain this or not ever have these thought experiments in your life, because without that, you're lacking perspective. Without that, you're too focused you're too in the picture. Like, you can't take a step back from it. So you're just looking at the pixels on the screen rather than taking a step back and seeing the whole movie, or as much as possible. Actually, yeah, I've got a treadmill behind me actually today now. I noticed it. I picked that Hedonic Treadmill. I didn't come across that originally first. I just came across it there recently again. That's just the other term that hedonic adaptation is used for. I came across it first, I think, when I started reading about, like, planes, I think it was. Maybe the invention of the planes. It's like we just adapted to that. Before the plane was invented and there was planes in the skies, like, the vast majority of people thought that was not possible. We could never be in the skies and build something that would stay up there. And then when it did happen, and it gradually evolves, planes get better, more people get on board, and it's a thing, then we just adapt to that. Like, we look at planes in the skies today and we just take it for granted that there's planes up there, and you're like, don't think about it. We just adapted to it. That's another part of hedonic adaptation as well. You see that with technology, like the things we have today with mobile phones in our pockets, and they're more powerful than computers in the 60s were, or even I think the computers that are around for when they put somebody on the moon, Neil Armstrong and the lads. Like, we take that for granted today because it's hedonic adaptation. There's nobody to actually blame. It's just something that's wired within us. That's how maybe it's evolution. It's a part of evolution. So, like, this isn't even something that is specific to psychology. Like, I've gotten the essence of this as well from reading philosophy. Like I said at the start of this podcast, like, people like Aristotle, these people who are philosophers, like, they talk about happiness, like, they think about this stuff. And I think a lot of that has gotten lost in our society today, because we're not looking at, like, what did he have a word? Eudaimonia? I think Aristotle had for happiness. But when they were talking about happiness, like, I got more of a sense that they were talking about, like, fulfillment and, like, a real innate sense of well-being and happiness. I think a lot of that has gotten lost in translation as we confuse pleasure seeking with happiness. Like, I don't equate happiness with pleasure seeking. I don't think there's anything wrong with pleasure seeking either. Like, hedonism as well as, like, pleasure. It's like when you overindulge, it's kind of like there's a picture of overindulgence in pleasure. I don't see anything wrong with that, because I've seen I'm not going to say that. I've seen when you kind of go on the other end of the spectrum and you're trying to not be hedonistic at all, then that resistance actually makes it more attractive. So I don't think that actually helps. I think a balanced view of hedonism, like, life starts to be lived as well, and you gain knowledge from experience. That's the true knowledge that you gain through experience. You can't read about something in a book and realize that this isn't for you. A lot of the time you can't do that unless it's a similar experience or something you've experienced before. Like, it's through experience that you realize to navigate those things a bit more. So with that was a confusion I had in my mind for a long time. I think I was misinterpreting pleasure seeking with happiness. Like, I think as humans, you'll read about this too with psychology. We as humans try and move towards pleasure and avoid pain. And avoiding pain is actually a stronger urge within us than to seek pleasure. Like, we're more risk averse than we are like focused on opportunities and the rewards. And you'll see that play out too in your lives, if you just pay attention, be more aware to it. But the pleasure seeking, that's where the confusion I had in my mind for a long time. And I picked it up. I must have picked it up from society, or I must have picked it up from, like, a lot of these ideas and stuff weren't just like something you came up with yourself as a child growing up or a teenager or anything. A lot of that has like been absorbed into you by in the environment you've been brought into. So that was one thing that I kind of mixed up in my mind for a long time. And when I did have these kind of like confusions and stuff, a lot of it was down to the fact I wasn't even like illuminating it in my thought process. I wasn't aware of this stuff. Like, I never once really questioned seriously about like happiness and stuff like that. It could be the age range too, but I didn't know a lot of people as well who were actually taking these questions seriously. But I think a lot of the confusion though came down to the mixing up pleasure with happiness. Like, pleasure seeking will give you some fleeting sense of happiness or a fleeting sense of that. And that in my opinion isn't happiness. It's not like what I'm looking for. Happiness is stepping off the treadmill and self-actualizing over time, from understanding who you are as a person, what you want to be doing, what sort of a world you want to live in. And even with that, it's like gaining the knowledge and understanding that like there's a dance here as well. Like, it's not just you operating in the world. There's a lot of different people, a lot of different variables. You need to adapt, and that's where a bit more of like mindfulness and a bit more meditation, that's what's helped me in my life to like not have a specific meaning to everything that comes into my life. Because when that happens, it keeps you very stuck and very rigid in the way you look at things and the way you can maneuver. But with a little bit of meditation and mindfulness, that's where you start to see as well that that's actually cultivating a state of mind where it feels more of like a happy baseline, where I'm not as resistant to things and I'm not as seeking things. I'm not like grasping at things as much. Even in Buddhism as well, that's something I've heard about. Like, a lot of our pain comes from this incessant need to grasp at things, like either grasp at something, pull it towards us, or push something away and resist it. Like, that's where the tension comes. And I have experienced a lot of tension in my mind and my body over the years. I still continue to do so at different levels, but it's something that I'm at least aware of now. I wasn't aware of all these tensions and all these things that were pulling me, these forces that were pulling me and stuff. But it's bringing curiosity into this too. Like, I remember first when I became more aware of the I'll be happy when loop, I had a lot of anger around it, because I was like, I've wasted a large portion of my life here chasing feelings that I wasn't aware that I was chasing. And a lot of anger was brought up for me that nobody educated me around this. That's, I guess, why I do these podcasts and stuff, is that hopefully I'll reach people at an earlier age than I was reached. And with less pain as well, because I had to go through a lot of pain to fucking wake up to this stuff as well. So that's a large part of why I do this. But yeah, it's ultimately stepping off the treadmill. When you step off the treadmill, you'll even focus more on like just being in the present and actually just paying attention to things. Because when you're on this treadmill as well, your attention is always focused on either the past, the future. It's projecting stuff all the time. It's this constant like unhappiness. It's like this constant like needing to get somewhere, but it's not in a healthy way. Like, the way I look at things today is that like evolution is something natural, and as human beings, I think we do need to evolve. We don't stay still. We either stagnate and go backwards, or we move forward and we evolve. So I think that that's healthy. But from the point of view of actually letting things unfold and being active in your process, like not passively taking things in all the time, being active in your creative process. And it's from doing that, from getting feedback from reality, that like things start to change and things start to evolve and stuff. but it is not as much of a forceful nature to it. Like, you don't feel as desperate to get anywhere because you realize there's nowhere to actually get to. That's the thing with this hedonic treadmill, is that it always feels like your happiness is dependent on your experience changing. And that's the treadmill experience. It's always feeling like that until you start to cop on to the fact that, like, this is quite illusionary. It's like I never actually get to that feeling of being happy. And when I do get there, it's not long before the goalposts shift again. So this is what this all kind of does. It helps you to slow down a bit more. And then, like, when I got off the treadmill initially, in my early 20s, that's when I started looking at mindset. That's when I started looking at meditation. That's when I started looking at being mindful. That's when I started looking at my own part and stuff. That's when I started looking at taking ownership. That's when I started questioning what I wanted from my life. That's when I started being more creative. That's when I started facing my fears more. That's when things just changed for me on a more internal level. And when things change internally, over time, your environment as well gradually starts to change. And even when you're in environments as well, you become less resistant to the environments you're in. That was a habit I picked up on for a long time too. When I got into personal development, I felt like I needed to reach some vision over here, and it'd be a different environment. And it's like, it never ends. But today can end. And this is when things can really start to click and change. As in, this is the real work. This is like you getting off the treadmill and gradually starting to see the few things that matter. And when you start to focus in on the things that matter, you can get better at them quicker as well, in a counterintuitive way. Because when your attention is on the things that matter, then they will grow. But when your attention is scattered, and when your attention is in the future or in the past all the time, then there's not much impact in the present that will build for tomorrow and the next day. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today, the hedonic treadmill. It sounds like a complex topic, but it's not. In implementation and practice, it's actually quite normal, and it can help you to notice how much your mind is preoccupied by things and how distracted it can be. And it can also help you to question happiness. What is happiness to you? What's happiness? What's contentment? What's the good life? I would encourage read some philosophy, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, anybody who's actually taken these questions seriously about human well-being. And it'll help you to determine the actions you'll take in your life moving forward as well. When you gradually start to immerse yourself in these things, it will change your actions and how you see things in the long term. Things will slow down a bit more. With more clarity. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope that's been of value and of use. Thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.